Mori tu, mori ora, kia tātou, homie, hui, taiki. Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, the fourth in our series to date by TIA. My name is Steve Hanrahan. I'm the Advocacy Manager for TIA and facilitator for today's webinar. Welcome to all our panelists and to everyone who's registered and attending today. Today we've invited three industry leaders to share how they're dealing with the total disruption to their businesses and their plans for the short term. Our panelists are Grant Webster, CEO of THL, Jacqui Wilkinson, Director of Adventure Capital, and Martin Gilbert, Director of Hassle-Free Tours. The format for the session is each panelist will provide a 5-minute introduction and then quick Q&A from attendees. Chris Roberts, Chief Executive of TIA, will also join the panel for the Q&A session. Please note the Q&A button at the base of your screen and please send your questions through. The webinar is scheduled for 30 minutes, however it may run for another 15 minutes longer if there is Q&A to get through. We will finish by 2:45 p.m. So Grant, if I could ask you to begin.
Great, thanks Steve. Well look, incredible times, isn't it? So thank you everybody for attending and joining in. So happy to take any questions. We are at THL's publicly listed, so we're going to watch some stuff we say, but I'll try and be as open as we possibly can. A few categories of things to race through. Let's start talking about customers and what we're doing with customers at the moment. I think there was a really good theme that was passing through the industry and social media globally at the start of all of this, which was don't cancel, rebook. Seems to have waned a little bit. We're really still pushing that theme. We're lucky enough to have long lead bookings, but we do still have a lot of international bookings through into summer 2021, which it's probably, to be fair, a little bit hopeful that those internationals are still going to be occurring based on border restrictions. But so rebook, don't cancel is still a big theme. In fact, we're incentivizing customers with that now as well. So we are providing a discount for customers that rebook. We're also working through with customers that did have to finish early and how we can get those unused days reused at other times. We do have the benefit of being multi-jurisdictional in terms of operating in the US, the UK and Australia. So we're sort of saying to people, look, you can also reuse your booking in other jurisdictions around the world as well. So then moving forward beyond that, we sort of haven't done anything silly with pricing. We've kept pricing where it was because there's not much point in trying to incentivize business that may not be there just through price at this point and setting new low levels anywhere. So we've tried to keep that pretty static. A couple of other things, I guess just a comment for us that we see, we all are creditors to someone and we're all got probably debtors from somewhere. We're seeing some of that cash liquidity not moving through in the industry in the way that we'd sort of like. So I guess we're sort of saying, well, let's pay everyone that we're supposed to pay on time with the hope that people that are due to pay on time as well as much as possible. So rather than being one of those businesses that maybe says I need to hold on to a bit of cash and not pay people, I think it's great if as an industry and a broader economy we can keep liquidity moving as best as possible. That'd be a good place to be. We're pushing very heavily for in the space of government subsidies. My personal view, and I've got to watch this relative to TIA and relative to THL, but my personal view is I don't think the government's done enough for tourism yet. There is an ongoing rhetoric that tourism is disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. My response to that is, where's the disproportionate support for the industry? That's the point that we're at. That's what we need now. We need more than what other industries that are going to come out of this quicker are going to get. So there's a number of things in behind that. And I think we'll hopefully start to see some more deeper sector specific responses coming through to the tourism industry in some period of time. We're very focused on our funding, obviously. We have traditional bank funding. And that's important to help those funders understand what your cash flow is going to be like over the coming 12 to be honest, 12 to 24 months is the sort of the timeline that they're looking at. A lot of us are going, hang on, I'm worried about my cash next week. And we're in that same place. But when talking to banks, having some idea of what your cash burn may be over a medium and longer term period is quite important, because they want to see your recovery plan if they're going to give you more debt now. If you haven't started talking to your banks, and I think most of the industry probably has, the response we're getting is talking early was good. And because we started a number of weeks ago talking to our banks about where we were and what's happening. What's also clear in industry in general is if you do need more equity, then getting that at the right time and working with your banks on what that looks like. Now, that may be in our industry that has so many different size players. That may be the publicly listed entities like Auckland Airport going out and doing a capital raise, or it may be small, medium businesses that join together or bring in new equity partners at this point in time. That ends up being an impact to the existing owners. That's sort of a reality, but surviving is probably more important than that at this point in time. Then lastly, for me, just keeping it quick, how you change your business model and where you pivot. Easy words to say, but for us, we're taking a sort of a bit of a design thinking approach by going, what is it that we have? How could it be used differently? What are other people's needs, and how might we meet those? So things like, because we've got mobile motorhomes, we're looking at those key aspects of, we have accommodation, we have mobility, we have hand washing and cleaning facilities, we have cooking facilities. So when you take those aspects and don't think of them just as a tourism product, you start thinking of medical needs, you start thinking of other mobile accommodation, of testing stations, temporary accommodation, all sorts of different things that start to come out of it. So just trying to rejig the business from that perspective. And also looking at domestic and what domestic may look like, and how you service that differently as well. What locations you need to be in that you may not be in today, or what locations you think you don't need to be in, are the questions that we're asking ourselves at the moment. It's a really, really hard time. There's no question about that. It's hard on the people in the business, and realizing that we're probably just about past crisis and moving into new norm is quite a hard reality for people, but that's sort of what we're trying to move ourselves to now as a business. This is the new norm for some period. So what else do we need to change in the way that we structure ourselves, the way that we talk, and what else we do with our product and take ourselves to market? It's all different. So that's sort of where we are. I'll pass back to you, Steve, and open to questions later on.
Thanks, Grant. Jacqui, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Jacqui Wilkinson. I'm one of the directors of Adventure Capital. We run camp, hike and bike adventures throughout New Zealand, and we have locations in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch. We came out of an amazing summer, as most of us did in the industry. I'm looking forward to a fantastic shoulder season, to basically have our business wiped out in less than a week. So for us, forward bookings are a really important part of our business, and essentially that was a pretty tough thing that happened. But we're not sitting in that space, and we've decided that what we need to do is what we've always done as a small business, which is start with the end in mind. So the very first question that we had to ask ourselves as a private small operator is this actually a sector that we still want to play in? And the answer for us was yes. And because the answer was yes, we then had to start thinking pretty quickly about what that meant in terms of reinventing ourselves, because we're coming into a whole new world now. That's very different, and some of the channels that we've relied on for business probably won't be there for some time to come, and some of them might not come back at all. So we're thinking about how to reinvent. And another question that we asked ourselves, which we found really useful, was what big challenges can this crisis help solve for us? Because I think when we're looking at the sector as a whole, there's actually already two things that we thought were impossible problems, which have pretty much disappeared overnight. One of them being over-tourism, and the second one being extreme seasonality. So we have basically a clean sheet of paper, which we're super excited about. We're looking at this clean sheet of paper saying, you know, do we want to go back to how things were 3 months ago? I don't think any of us would actually answer yes to that. So how do we want this sector to look? How do we want our businesses to look? So that's what we're thinking about over the next few weeks in the coming months. But if that's where we want to be, we've actually got quite a lot of work in order to get there. We've got another 2 years of quite difficult times to get through. So we made a decision as the crisis was starting to unfold to make some pretty hard decisions and some heartbreaking decisions, and to make them very quickly, but not just to make those decisions, but actually act on them. So for us, we had to talk to our team, we had to talk to landlords, we had to talk to suppliers, and just like everybody else, we had to talk to clients in our networks. So we did that fast, and we acted fast. So that's enabled us now to have a bit more certainty about what we need to do next, which is to sort of focus on the short to midterm. And we've identified a few priorities for our business that we think are real opportunities. So being based in urban centres, our first priority is going to be looking at our local neighbourhoods, looking at the people that surround our locations, how we can engage with them, what we can do, what we're going to need to do to our products and services to appeal more strongly. For us, that does include looking at the pricing, looking at the inclusions, and definitely looking at more self-guided options as opposed to the guided experiences. So that's our first priority. Second one will be the broader region. So those customers we have on tap that we can who can easily access our locations. Third priority for us will be looking at the regions that surround us. So those are the drive markets, the people that can come into our urban centres where we are, but also likewise the locals, what we can get them doing, experiencing in those surrounding regions, and how we can get them out and about and experiencing some cool, interesting stuff. And then sort of fourth priority really is looking at the rest of New Zealand, because I think we need to all be realistic about when flight capacity is going to come back on, what pricing is going to look like, how much capacity there actually will be, and even the regions that will be serviced initially. I think that we need to be very realistic when we're thinking about the domestic opportunity, that it's not going to be fly market for some time. And if we're a small business like myself, we need to think realistically about what we need to do in that short next 12 months just to capture what we've got on hand. And then the fifth priority for us, which is something I'm super excited about because it's something that we've done well in traditionally, and I think we'll do better in the future, which is the premium international visitors. So that's kind of like something that's more moving into the reinvention phase, but sort of looking ahead to who's most likely to come back to New Zealand. We have no idea, of course, at this moment, but likely candidates for that will be the premium international visitor markets who have the time and the money to spend in New Zealand. So that's what we're going to be in terms of, I guess, that reinvention piece, going back to where we started. That's who we're going to be thinking about, is, you know, what are the markets that we actually think are realistic for us to target in the future, and what are their needs, what are the products they're most likely going to be interested in, and how can we be there to help them. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. It's we're looking to the future with optimism, because we still want to be part of the sector, and I think as everyone's been talking about, we are all in this together, which is pretty cool. And I think it's an exceptional time for us to think, what are those big challenges that this crisis is going to help us solve? I think we've got an amazing opportunity as an industry to work together and help solve those challenges.
Thanks, Jacqui. Before we move over to Mark, just a reminder to attendees to send through your questions, and we'll be moving into Q&A shortly. Mark, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Look, for those who don't know me, I'll just give a bit of a background of the business and what we do. So we've been operating for about 17 years. I'm the managing director and owner of the company with my wife, Nikki. We're based in Christchurch, but we operate in Auckland as well. In Auckland, we operate the Soaring Kiwi Hop On Hop Off open top tour up there. And in Christchurch, we operate the Hop On Hop Off tour there as well. Plus we run a range of day trips out from Christchurch. And we also have about 6 tours that we operate for the cruise lines out of Lyttelton and Akaroa, which is sold on board as shore excursions through the cruise lines. In the summertime, we have a workforce of up to about 60 staff, and that's made up of contractors, casuals, fixed term contracts, and full-time staff. In the wintertime, that workforce basically drops about half. We operate a fleet of about 20 vehicles, and about 98% of all our business comes from international visitors, and a really large portion of that is from the cruise ship market. So the immediate steps we've taken straight away was the first thing, obviously, to apply for the wage subsidy. So we've retained pretty much all the staff that would have been employed over this period of time. So I think we've got about 25 people on the wage subsidy at the moment. But we realised straight away there's no way we could keep the staff on full pay, even 80%. So we went through a restructure process, and most of our staff are on the wage subsidy at the moment. Sorry, they're down to the wage subsidy with reduced hours. The other big thing we'll be doing is reducing our overheads as much as possible. Everything like putting vehicle registrations on hold, changing the insurance policies to static policies, looking at what things we don't need to continue on with over the winter, and then also talking to suppliers that we've got locked into contracts with around what they can do to help landlords and things like that. One of the big things we're doing, like Grant mentioned, is having really good conversations with our bank manager. That's probably one of the things we took out of after the earthquakes, the importance of keeping in contact with your bank manager and letting them know what your plans are. And then the other big thing, which is really hard to do at the moment, was obviously budgeting. So we're basically running lots of different budget scenarios, from worst case scenario through to best case scenario. And then the key thing flowing out of that is obviously our forecast for what requirements we need to get through the next 6, 12 and 18 months. So make sure we've got those facilities in place. And then we're also spending this time to sort of have a good look at the business. One of the problems that we face was so much of our business, like I said, it's probably nearly more than 98% to be honest, was based around international visitors, and a lot being that cruise market. So we're having to look at what different things we can offer this summer. So we're basically looking back to what we learned after the earthquakes and what sort of worked then with the domestic market. So things like we'll utilise our Route Master Heritage buses for weddings, maybe corporate functions, and also look to re-engage our high country tours again, which we promoted through that time more for the group market. I guess the only problem with that is a lot of that group stuff was more the senior market, and we're just not sure, how that's going to look in the summer. Are they going to be wanting to be out doing tours, or more hunkering down still at home? And we'll certainly be chasing sort of local businesses to see what we can get out of there for sort of wine tours and stuff like that. Like I mentioned, we're really trying to utilise on some of the experience that we learnt after the earthquakes. And I guess one of the mistakes I made after the earthquakes was being far too optimistic with how quickly things would recover. And for that reason, I didn't reduce my overheads enough. And we clocked up bigger losses in the years afterwards than what we needed to do had I taken a more cautious approach. So I guess this time round, the approach we're taking is more plan for the worst, but hope for the best. And one thing we know for sure, we're certainly going to be a much smaller business in 6, 12, 18 months' time. So how does that new business look? At this stage, mind you, everything changes day to day, so it's really hard to plan, but we're not really planning to run any tours until November. And then depending on how the summer looks, there may be some tours that we don't even start up the summer. We have to have a look at each thing and go, look, can we make it sustainable, or it is actually better to have those vehicles just off the road, maybe even until next summer. But that really depends on what happens with border restrictions, and we're really hoping for that sort of bubble with the Australia scenario. We're trying to keep in regular communication with our staff and trying to stay as positive as we can, but at the same time, trying to be realistic and honest around how the future does look, how long the wage subsidy continues on for maybe, and just how many staff we'll need. I guess too, we're looking back to the earthquakes and taking obviously a long-term view on things. Obviously, we need to take that short-term view to make the decisions to get through, but also taking a long-term look on things. And I guess the one thing, nearly 10 years on after the earthquakes, we did come out of the earthquakes being a bigger and better business because of it. It made us make changes to our business and also look for other opportunities we may not have done had it not been for the earthquakes. And look, one of the biggest challenges we had with our business was the seasonality and just the huge deficits that we were running through the winter. So we're taking this opportunity to really reshape our business, so when things come back, we'll be a much leaner business over those winter months. And I guess just on a personal note, even though it's extremely stressful times for everybody at the moment, I'm making sure I'm enjoying having this extra time with the family, which I haven't had over the last few months. And the other key thing I'm doing every day, just from a personal note, is just picking up the phone and ringing people. I think it's really important at the moment we stay connected and keep talking to other people in industry, whether not even just talking to and talking to family members. So yeah, that's sort of where we're at the moment.
Great, thanks, Mark. All right, thanks to the panelists for those introductions and opening comments. We'll open it up for Q&A now. Please send your questions through via the Q&A there. We'll move into those now, and just Chris Roberts will also be joining us for Q&A session as well. First question here, in regards to liquidity and tourism not being a regulated marketplace, and with us now having the opportunity to reimagine, restart the industry, is now not the time to regulate the industry to ensure the long-term financial stability of tourism in New Zealand? Grant, would you like to kick off with any comments on greater regulation to ensure this long-term financial stability of tourism?
Look, I think reading on the rest of that question, it's sort of, I think, is pushing into that point of bonding and customer deposits, where do they sit, so forth and so on. My personal view is I'd be a big proponent of that. I actually think when you think about the impact of the Thomas Cook demise in the UK, the fact that you had bonding behind a lot of that in Germany and so forth. One of the things that makes Germany so strong in travel is it is the most customer protected industry, I think, that exists in Germany. So I actually think that idea of sort of bonding to some extent that's not onerous, but actually just ensuring that business models are created on genuine cash flow, not sitting on deposits and not passing through, and different things that happen in different places. I think just keeping that liquidity moving has a lot of sense. And look, industry gets competitively pushed into things that this is a reset point from that perspective. So I think, we can all sort of maybe lift our head up, and I think there is some opportunity for that, yeah. Not in a way that inhibits business, in a way that does protect the industry more.
Mark or Jacqui, don't know if you have any comments, additional comments?
No, I probably haven't got much to comment on that one, to be honest.
Jacqui, how will you transfer a guided product to a self-directed one and still make money?
That's a very good question. I think another side to the equation there, which is how do we save money by moving to self-guided. So there's obviously lots of overheads that go into guided experiences. There's inordinate amounts of extra cost that activity operators have to put in when you provide a guided experience. There's also health and safety additional measures that need to be in place, extra auditing, overheads, all that sort of thing. So with self-guided experiences, they're less hands-on essentially, and so in terms of operational delivery, they can be a lot more straightforward. So I think actually it is an opportunity for anyone out there who is offering guided only experiences to have a think about how you might be able to pivot into the self-guided territory, because I think there's lots of good opportunities domestically for that, because New Zealand is traditionally, I'm not saying it's going to be like this moving forward, because it might be an opportunity to introduce New Zealanders to guided experiences, but traditionally we're not a culture that tends to book that type of product. So it's a good opportunity to test and try some new things, I think.
Mm. Mark, I might start this one with you. You did touch on it perhaps briefly. Is everyone looking at 12-month close on our border protection?
Look, it's, I guess the thing with the border, it's just, who knows? It's every day you read conflicting articles around what border closures look like and how long they're going to continue on for. So I guess for us, the approach we're taking is plan for that, because that's the worst case scenario comes off and you can get through it. Is a better scenario than planning for it to be open and then getting a surprise and it's not. So I mean, like I said before, we're really hoping on that kind of Australia-New Zealand bubble scenario, and we get those Australian visitors back again. But it's, who knows? That's the thing. You can't. The only thing that's certain at the moment is nothing is certain. Who would have ever imagined this 3 months ago where we're at now? So I guess that's the thing I'm finding frustrating. It is really hard to plan because we just don't know how things look in the months ahead.
Any other comments from the panelists on that one?
Forecasting, I think, is like pin the tail on the donkey, but everybody's blindfolded, and the donkey's called Eeyore, and he's running away at the same time. So God knows.
Steve, I can perhaps make a comment on that TransTasman Bubble idea, which a lot of people are obviously interested in. We have started some work on that with colleagues across in Australia, and it's getting a little bit of media attention. An article in the Sydney Morning Herald today. Obviously, a lot of people can see the sense of a TransTasman bubble at a point that it's safe to do so, that if both countries are on the sort of same track in terms of containing the virus, and also perhaps to also bring in our Pacific neighbours, because the Pacific is hugely reliant on Australia and New Zealand for all of its connections, including tourism. So if we could create an Australasia or a Oceania bubble at some point where movement can be safely done, we have the right technology and controls at the border, the right protections. I think there's a will to do that, but it is still very much a health question as to whether it can be done safely from a health point of view.
Thanks, Chris. There's a couple of questions here around government support, and I'll bring them together. One there, how does TIA see the chances of the wage subsidy scheme to be extended, and what other possible measures are being pushed by TIA for the Minister of Finance and so on? And then Grant, there's also one there, what's your sense that government will support the sector in the next few months? Is it real or just a pipe dream or false hope? So perhaps just some comments from around the government support. Grant, you did touch on it in your introductory comments. Anything else to add?
Look, I guess what I would add, so do I think it's pipe dream? No, because I think that what we've got to do, there's a couple of key people that count. There's a whole lot of people that count, but certainly the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Tourism. And I think we've got good connections in there from a TIA perspective to, certainly with Kelvin Davis, no question, and with Grant Robertson, we've got to get on side with the PM as well. The difficult challenge for them is going to be how do they bias one industry over another? And I think there are good reasons why you can say that we should. I mean, there's 100,000 unemployed in New Zealand, 111,000 unemployed in New Zealand at the moment is the stats they're talking about, and that could double or triple. Well, all of that increase could come from the tourism industry if we're not supported in the appropriate way. So I think just realigning the government's understanding of just how serious it is and keeping our voice as high as and as loud as it has been, and even louder still, I think is really important. So the economic reality, I think, will suggest that they will have to help. I think there are some political and emotional things that will need to sort of be overcome to achieve it, but I don't think it's a pipe dream.
Thanks. There's, Chris, a question there around, a couple of questions around the wage subsidy being extended beyond the current 12 weeks. Any thoughts or comments on that one at the moment?
Well, we know it's probably the most common theme coming through from members is wanting to know, will it be extended? What's the possibility of it being extended or replaced with something else that helps keep workers connected with business? The government's been very quiet publicly on that, but I know they are considering those options. We have to acknowledge, of course, that about $9 billion has been spent on the wage subsidy scheme in the first 12 weeks. So immediately you say, well, let's just extend it for another 12 weeks. The number of people accessing it might fall away a bit because some sectors of the economy will be back at work, but you might be talking another $5 or $6 billion. So these are large numbers and pretty serious things for government they have to consider. But we are hearing that businesses need to know well ahead of the end of the 12-week period what is going to happen. It's not going to be like next week's announcement on Monday that presumably we're coming out of lockdown on Wednesday. It can't be that sort of timeframes. We need weeks of advance notice about what's going to happen at the end of the wage subsidy scheme. And we've been warning that if that's not done, for our sector, all it's really going to do is going to keep people connected for now with some income coming in for now at $585 a week, and then they're all laid off at the end of the 12 weeks and a sudden mass increase in the unemployment line, especially from our sector. So the government, we know the government's aware of all that. We haven't seen any hint of whether it will be extended or replaced with some other targeted scheme.
Thanks, Chris. I'm mindful we've just ticked over the original timing of half an hour, it's 2:30, to attendees who have to leave now. Thank you very much for joining on to the webinar, and the webinar will be available on our website, the full webinar, by the end of today. We'll continue with the questions for another 10 to 15 minutes. There is one here around domestic tourism and pricing structures and what they might look like when targeting a domestic market. So Jacqui, do you want to kick off with any thoughts around the pricing structure for a domestic versus an international market? And would you look at dual pricing or alternative pricing for international and domestic?
We personally wouldn't look at dual pricing. I think that's a bit of a dangerous road to go down because it's very difficult to get back out of that once you're in it. And I don't think it's something we would want to be. Don't think it's going to help us in the long term. But yeah, in terms of domestic, what the price points are that people are going to be able to tolerate, I think we need to be extremely realistic that we have had a health crisis, which is leading to an economic crisis, which is going to lead to a social crisis fairly shortly. So the economic challenges that a lot of people around New Zealand are going to be facing are fairly significant, but I don't think that should deter us from charging what we need to charge to stay in business and to make some money. So I think the other thing that's really important with pricing is not to get too hung up about the price, but to actually be very clear about what you need to charge to remain in business and to get through this period. And also to think about your long-term branding, because if you start discounting and price chopping right now, you'll never be able to come back out of that, or you won't be able to very easily. So you need to think carefully. If you need to charge, I don't know, whatever it is, $150 to run your experience, then you need to think about who's going to be able to afford to run, to pay that price. There's obviously little levers that you can pull with package deals for families and potentially think about the commission rates you're going to be saving. So if you work with agents and you're used to paying 20% commission, for example, you could think about potentially passing that 20% discount on to the consumer, which is a way of making the price look more attractive. So yeah, I think there's things you could consider, but definitely dual pricing or major cost cutting, I don't think is a very sustainable way to go about things.
Any other comments from the panelists on domestic pricing? Okay. If one here about the banks, have you found your banks to be open to lending, or do you think is tourism on the no-go list?
I guess I talked about that. I think it's on the be wary list, be realistic and be honest list, and consider equity if you need it list. That's so they're cautious. The banks are well aware of the sort of the expectations. One thing I would say, whatever case you put forward, and you'll have to put some numbers forward, they will discount that further. They will challenge your assumptions, but they will discount it further. They never take what a business says and say that's the worst case. They take another percentage off it. So just be aware of that. I'm not saying inflate your numbers. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying when you look at the way that they look at it, think about their lens. Right? You were in discussions with your banks.
Yeah, look, I guess what I'd touch on that too is after the Roma experience, after the earthquakes, is be realistic with your numbers, because if you present something that's too good and in a year's time things that aren't great and you're going back there again and you're saying to your bank manager, well, we're miles off what we thought we were going to do in this 12 months, they're probably going to be less willing to help. So, and also too, I guess you've got to weigh up, it's all very well about a take on debt, but your ability to pay that debt back as well. And I guess everyone will be in a different position with what their balance sheets look like now, what their appetite for debt is. So you certainly, I'd say, be honest with your bank, be realistic with your numbers, and just think hard about how much debt you can and want to take on, what I guess I'd say.
Great, thanks. There's one here just about social distancing and the impact. Mark, I might start with you. Long term, how will social distancing, once we are open, impact on your business model? And are you thinking about or preparing for that?
Absolutely, yeah, it's going to have a big impact. I mean, like we said before, one of the options we were looking at were maybe double-decker and wedding charters, but it come, the summer, we've still got these social distancing in place, maximum on numbers. Well, then that's going to impact on us. I guess with the high country tours we used to do, it was targeted around the groups, so we could make that affordable for the domestic market. But all of a sudden, if you had to leave 10 seats empty in a 20-seater vehicle, then it's half your capacity, and therefore your revenue stream. So it's something that definitely has to be taken into consideration, but so things that, once again, it's really hard to plan for that because we don't know how that's going to look in the months ahead, but certainly something everyone needs to take into consideration with their forward planning.
Steve, I don't know how many on the call would have seen the Prime Minister's announcement just ahead of this webinar, and the details around level 3, which we would hope that we're going to go into in a week or so's time after lockdown ends. It's possibly more restrictive than we had thought. It's certainly more restrictive than the couple of days that we were in level 3 prior to going to level 4. And essentially it means that no hospitality or tourism businesses that have customers, face-to-face customers, can operate. So certainly bars, restaurants, cafes, all of those facilities have to remain closed. They can provide a takeaway service only if it's contactless. So it is quite restrictive under level 3, and we don't know how long level 3 might be around, potentially months. So that's the realism that we're facing at the moment, especially in that hospitality sector, that our cafes, bars, restaurants, those other customer face-to-face serving services are really going to be severely restricted for under level 3 for however long that we're in that phase.
Thanks, Chris. One here about industry debtors. At present, one of the attendees finding a distinct lack of communication and payments from the larger Australian-based wholesalers and inbound organisations, whereas New Zealand-based companies are communicating, paying their invoices. Do the panelists have any awareness of the state of these Australian companies or any views on this one?
It's probably, especially given that this is recorded, I don't know
Exactly.
the exact detail. I'll tell you openly, and we've copped some flack for this. So we have communicated with, we have put out two different communications. There have been some, and including some Australian debtors that we've had that have been brilliant. They've paid bang on time, they've been very communicative beforehand, and we have sent them letters of acknowledgement because that is what keeps the industry flowing. And then we have sent letters to others saying, you're not communicating, why are you not communicating? It gives us, are you solvent or not? And you need to communicate. And that is certainly the starting point. And then, to be honest, there are some debtors across Australia and across the world that you struggle to believe some of the statements you are given because they are not consistent day to day or week to week. And there are some that you can see are taking clear action, doing what they can. And there are some that genuinely have been inundated because of the cancellations and everything else. They haven't been able to process invoices properly and fast, but they are there and they are doing it as they can. And you can see that because they are processing bits. That would be my summary, and push the communication out your way.
Great, thanks, Brian. One here just about the education sector, tourism teachers and in secondary schools, tertiary education institutions want to help. How can we promote this industry, or what would you like us to discuss in schools to interest students, to interest them and encourage them to move forward to studying tourism and keep them engaged in the industry, and with their discussions for curriculum change with the Ministry of Education? So any thoughts on keeping our young people and people wanting to come into the industry engaged over this time?
It's a hard one. I mean, I'm not on mute, so I might as well talk. But I think that's a pretty difficult question to answer at this point. I would suggest that most parents would not be sort of too keen for their children to be expressing interest in moving into tourism right now. But that's not to say that we can't motivate them and enthuse them and inspire them with how we come out of this crisis. Because if we do it well and we do it collaboratively and we come out with a very inspiring strategy off the back of this and come out reinvented in the new sustainable way, then that's going to be an amazing story for our children and for the for other workers who may have lost jobs in other sectors who are considering a complete career change. But that's up to us, I think, as an industry and as operators to keep up the inspiration. In the schools, I'm not close enough to schools to really know what else to say, but yeah.
I'd add one quick comment to that, Jacqui. I think your last comments are dead right. And look, we're all tourism connected that are on this webinar, so I'm going to take a crack at us all, unfortunately. But I'm part of it. In a way, we're at the bottom and heading towards the bottom. So in a way, there's no better time to enter the industry. If you were going to do a small startup, if you were getting some friends together and doing something different, you're not encumbered with the debt and balance sheets and the negative position that we're all in. You've actually coming into something from the bottom and can only see up. So if you were new and coming into the industry, might be a good time. Maybe not right now, but in a few months, maybe. Sad, but it's a wry smile on the rest of the panel, not a Sorry, Steve, back to you. I'll put myself on mute before I say anything else.
Mark, I might this one start with you. What makes you most nervous about how tourism businesses might behave once they reopen their doors? Any thoughts on that one?
I hadn't really given too much thought about that one. I mean, I guess what I'm really hoping is we'll see a collaborative approach or working together. That's one of the things that I've been talking with the operators here, how we cross-promote and work together as an industry. We've got to come together and support each other through that. I think, like everyone else, I'm panelists, I probably hate to see a slash and burn approach to pricing. Obviously, look, we do have to be realistic with the domestic market, but once again, if there's no point slashing your price down to a rate that gets people, but you're not making any money on it. So, you have to be realistic about that. And that's why we're taking the view that for us, it might be better to park some product and launch other products that's more suited to the market than try and push a market that's not really domestically focused, I suppose. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I'd hope to see people working together and, like Grant said, everyone's still paying their bills and keeping that money flowing as best we can, and and behaving in a caring way, I suppose. I'd like to say anyway.
Thanks, mate. Right, I'm mindful of time. Just got a couple of minutes to go, so I think this is the last question for each of the panelists to respond to. If you had to reimagine tourism, how would you describe it in 2 sentences? Jacqui, would I start with you on if you were reimagining tourism, what might it look like?
First and foremost, sustainable. I think that's we have never been given an opportunity like this before to get rid of stuff that's just environmentally damaging, culturally damaging, community damaging, uncaring towards people in our beautiful world. I think that really, I mean, I could just say it in one word: sustainability.
Okay, thanks. Mark?
Yeah, look, I agree with that, sustainable. Look, my view has always been we work in the best industry in the world. We get to showcase this beautiful country from people from all around the world. So I'd like to see the industry held higher in the community for what we do. We create experiences and we allow people to experience other parts of the world. So, and I guess one thing I'd love to see more is not being so seasonal as well. Sort of a more regular flow of visitors throughout the year, but I know that's always been a challenge for a long time.
Yeah, actually, I'll just agree with that. There's 2 words. It's no more over tourism and no more extreme seasonality. That's the perfect scenario, isn't it?
And Grant?
I'll steal from some of the future fit work that we've been doing beforehand. So economically inclusive, environmentally restorative, and socially just.
Perfect. Thanks, Grant. We'll close it there. Firstly, thank you to our panelists for your sharing of your information and your views. So much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you to our members for participating today and for your questions. A couple of other closing comments. The webinar will be available on the TIA website this evening and also in tomorrow's T-mail. Also a reminder to visit our COVID-19 pages on the TIA website. Lots of current information there, advice and support for operators. The comms team are continually updating that and putting new information on there. And lastly, if you have any particular queries, please get in touch with us via info@tia.org.nz to have a team responding to those queries. Or please call us also to discuss. Our phone numbers are on the website contact page. Just a closing carry here to finish. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te io, te aroha, me te maratu, tihei moriora. May peace, love and safety be upon us all. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.